Hello all. So in this, part 2 of my table saw build, I'll be showing you how I put together a sliding carriage for it. Made from mostly spare parts from either this build or previous ones, there were a few challenges to overcome as I wanted it to be quick release so it could mount to the upcoming router table end, but also it needed to clear the motor body for the Mafel saw mounted underneath. For the actual carriage, I have here a couple of pieces of 2080 profile and a piece of Incra miter track. Both of these are salvaged from my previous router table fence and track. The idea being the profile pieces will be for a bed, sandwiching the track in the centre, which will need spacing up a little. I'll be using the leftovers of the 8mm alley plate you might remember I used in part 1 to hold the bed together and fixed to the rails. Much marking and measuring later, the alley plates are drilled out with a multitude of fixing holes. Here you can see the only thing I needed to buy for the sliding carriage, the 12mm linear rails. 1 metre long and only £30 for the pair, including rails and bearing thingies. It's a good deal I think, so I'll leave a link in the description. The bearing blocks come with M5 threaded holes, so are quite easy to fit. Once attached to the alley plate, I can flip the assembly upside down and fix the pieces of profile for the bed. Trying as I go to keep everything as square as I can to avoid problems later. Starting to look a bit like a sliding carriage now. I breathe a sigh of relief here as the profiles for the bed appear to be nice and flat. I might have had to get the plates milled flat if they weren't already. Using offcuts of a piece of 4mm and a piece of 3mm alley plate, I've made a set of shims to seat the miter track within a paper thickness to the right height. I drilled my own set of holes in the miter track for fixing too. I know it's a bit odd to have so much miter track hanging out either end, but it gives me scope to mount the miter gauge either way round on the bed, keeping the bulk of the miter gauge itself off the bed. The miter gauge just locks into place using the little split ring screws you normally use for reducing slop in the track, but just tighten them more to lock it. To mount the rail and carriage assembly to the saw table, I'm making L brackets with a diagonal brace from profile offcuts. Nothing too fancy, but hopefully effective. Again, to save problems later, I want these as accurate as possible, so I'm using stops and clamps on the miter saw for uniformity. Just as a side note, you can cut the odd piece of aluminium with the wood blades without dulling the teeth noticeably. If you plan your own profile build though, or want to cut alley regularly, it's worth investing in an aluminium cutting blade. The one I use is a 60-some tooth one from Irwin. It does a pretty good job. So with the pieces for the mounts cut, it's time for more sliding T-nut and bracket action. I keep checking as I go, before and after I tighten down, that all the pieces are flat and square. I had a bunch of corner fixing plates from the parts bin for 2020 profile, which I'll be using to fix the diagonal piece. Although not made for the 4040 profile I'm using, they can be made to work. Like I said in the last video, when you're enclosing the ends of profile pieces, try to think ahead what fixings, like sliding T-nuts, you'll need to insert before you start fixing it in place. It sounds obvious, but honestly, the amount of times I've had to disassemble things for this reason, you really want to avoid that frustration. Both sides of the assembly get these plates, making it super strong. I've mounted the supports to the saw frame with cam levers and popped the rail and carriage on top. Despite the number of fixing holes in the rails, I still need to drill a couple more at one end. The beauty of profile is that with the sliding T-nuts, I'm afforded a good deal of movement to align the carriage to the blade. It's rubbing against the table here, so it's a bit stiff, but a few adjustments later, all was well. Talking of adjustment, there's no getting away from the fact that setting the carriage height to that of the table was a bit of an ordeal. I used a straight edge clamp to the tabletop for reference. You can see there the red cam lever loosened frees the whole assembly. I then button end up to the straight edge, then repeat with the other. 4 or 5 times I went through this process before it was right. Much of the effort's not broadcastable, or the language for that matter. But eventually, it was flush as a flush thing. Once in position, corner brackets on the table legs were set to meet the bottom of the mounts for the sliding carriage, which I didn't film me putting on or in place. Likewise, the 4 screws through the table legs at each end to adjust the cant of the carriage you can just about see in the shot here. But yeah, each leg has one of these corner brackets set at the right height and a cam lever above it, held in position with a T-nut acting as a stop so it doesn't fall to the ground when not in use. I thought I'd show you this in real time. The sliding carriage assembly is mounted to the end that will house the router table, and I'm swapping it to the table saw end. It was a 40-second process, which would be less still if it wasn't my first time doing it. Pretty pleased with that. With all that out of the way, I can now show you it in use. The big Mafel KSP85 underneath cuts far smoother upside down like this than I ever remember it doing the right way up, it has to be said. Effortless cutting. Considering the general construction blade mounting in it currently, it gives a really clean cut too. I can't wait to see what it's like with a higher tooth count crosscut blade. Thankfully, all the time and effort, and it was a lot of time and effort, dialing in the sliding carriage has paid off with good square cuts. Time well spent, even if there's enough in the swear jar for a short weekend away. This should of course translate into decent 45 cuts. If I go in a bit closer, there's very little to complain about. It's a clean cut and the two 45s make a good 90. Doing the 45 cuts did make me realise the obvious in that thumb screws for the mitre fence would be advantageous. One last little demo cut I wanted to show was on a small MDF melamine panel. Not that this sliding carriage is a pretense at a panel saw, but it's nice to see what it can do. The panel's about 620mm long, so near the 660mm max of the carriage. Again, I'm pretty staggered at how effortless the cut is, just flies through. The MDF edge was very clean cut and the top melamine face was also really clean. Not quite the same story below with a fair bit of chipping in the melamine. A lot of potential there though, I think. So that about rounds out the quick release sliding carriage. It works better than I imagined it would, to be fair. This is a project still in build process, so a few tweaks will be done as it settles in, I'm sure. I should say, the only reason I went the sliding carriage route rather than jigs and sleds is mostly down to room. as in I don't have any to store any jigs and sleds, the table saw and router table. I should also mention that no, I didn't do any plans for this, so there are none to share. It really was just an exercise in using a collection of bits to solve a problem, but if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them in the comments. Thanks for watching.